I'm going to share today about the chapter on error correction and or corrective feedback is the term they used. And one thing we want to be careful about, I'm going to talk about some different ways of correcting, also just some things to think about in terms of how we correct, and kind of two alternate ways of approaching correction in terms of the sequencing in our lessons and what that looks like. And I think really all of this, and they do say this in the chapter, that people use more than one methodology, that we really do kind of a combination. But just to be cognizant and aware of what we do. One thing is not to overcorrect, because it can really intimidate students from participating, and also to let students know that errors are really common, they're normal, it's part of learning a new language, and that it's okay. That is just part of the process. And the other thing is that most students want correction, and they want to be understood. I know that's very true of my students. Even very advanced students feel like they still, they're still having some inner language and other things, pronunciation and more, that make them not being understood. And so it's really important to help students to be understood and to understand. And so that means bringing their attention. A lot of what we do is bringing the students' attention to these issues so that we can move through that and be successful. So let's see. So clarification. So there are several kinds of ways of giving corrective feedback, and so one is to a clarification. You can ask for clarification. You can say, "Oh, can you tell me a little bit what you were trying to say there?" Or let's see here. What I said. Did you say 16 or 60? So just asking them for a little more information so they can kind of think about it and look for another way of doing it. Further explanation. And then we have correction of error explicit. So that would be very directly saying that's not correct, and this is the correct answer. So that's a very direct way of doing it. And then there's elicitation, which is an example would be, how do you say that in English? So just eliciting, prompting. It's kind of a prompt to ask them to look at their work again and reconsider what they had done. And then there is meta-linguistic, which is like metacognition, looking at it from a little bird's eye view of what's the rule here, and you left out a verb. And when somebody leaves out a verb, and I did this today, as a matter of fact, just revisiting that, every sentence needs to have a verb. And do you have a verb there? And give them a chance to go back into their work and get that, maybe even explain, can you identify the subject, verb, object? And then this is recast, is restating without the error. For example, I go to the store. I go to the store yesterday, and then you would come back with, you went to the store yesterday, and hopefully they would recognize that was a correction. And then repetition would be to restate the mistake that the student makes again, so they can just hear it and hopefully catch it. And then the chapter goes on to talk a little bit about in the classroom form focused instruction. And so we want, again, this idea of bringing the student's attention to form. And so a couple of different approaches. One is focus on form, and the other is focus on forms. The first one is that you have a series of tasks planned for the class, and as you move through these tasks, you notice as an instructor that there is some work that needs to be done, that there's some attention we need to spend and some time we need to spend to address whatever the students are struggling with, that you're starting to notice by working with them. And then sort of rechanneling the class a little bit for a while you're addressing the student need, whatever needs to be addressed, and start dealing with the form of language. So example would be task 1, task 2, and then there's a teacher intervention where now you're addressing what the students need to learn, what you have noticed, and then a return to task 2 after explaining something, and then continue to task 3. So that's one approach. And the other approach is that you come in prepared. You have I think I do both. I definitely come in prepared, but sometimes I'll notice something while I'm in the class as well, and then I'll address that. But here it is the idea that you will come in prepared to address several form issues during the course of the class, whether it be, if it were grammar or if it were pronunciation, but there's some sort of predetermined lesson with that incorporated in it. And then you would have, so the example here is instruction on form. You'd start out with your instruction on form, kind of like what we do with our lesson plans, where you have that after your introduction, and then practice, which is what we do also in those lesson plans, and then instruction on form again, and then one more practice. So yeah, I think it was really good suggestions.